welcome to Wales. As those of you who come regularly to Taking the Traditional will see, I have a very different background this evening. So we've been allowed over the border. We have come to the seaside. So I think the broadband here is fine. There are creaky doors in the house, so I just apologise if I have any of my family heffalumps kind of going over or slamming doors or anything. That's who it is. It's just them chilling out. I apologise now. So time to get to the true business of the evening. A couple of months ago, we had Tanya Batt as my guest for Taking the Tradition on, who is from New Zealand. She's been over here, met lots of storytellers over here, and actually quite a lot of her storytelling journey was about spending time in the UK. But she's very much now part of the community in New Zealand and lives in an eco community and is really making a connection with that place through gardening and the land and the people that she meets there and telling stories all around the world, but of New Zealand as well. We had hoped in that evening that we might be able to have two voices from New Zealand. And we were hoping that we would really be able to get one of the Indigenous tellers and one of the Indigenous people, one of the Maori, to join us. But actually, this is much better because Tanya deserved a whole hour to herself. We could have gone on for much longer. And my guest tonight is Hirini Reedy, who I'm hoping this is just going to be the beginning of a conversation. I've met Hirini through Tanya, so thank you very much to Tanya for the introduction. And the Maori culture is something that I know very little about, but I'm just absolutely fascinated and really interested. And there's a real calling from the other side of the world to find out more about Maori culture. And I'm assuming that's the same for you because you are all here. So I would like to very much put your hands together. Lots of whooping on the clap for the wonderful Hirini Reedy. So Maori healer, storyteller, and I'm very grateful to you for getting up so early in the morning. It's 8 in the evening. The sun is just going down behind me, but the sun is coming up for you, Hirini, and you are in our future on Wednesday morning.
Greetings to all of you assembled from around the planet from the four winds. Greetings. A bellbird opens the dawn here. Our owl is closing the night and opening the night where you are in Wales on the other side of the planet. As we talk about the stories, we also are talking about life, and how we can coexist in multiple places, yet still be connected by the one earth. And each of you that's gathered, I see all the places from which you are from. I honor your mountains. I honor your rivers. I honor your sacred spaces. I honor your bloodlines. I honor the celestial origins that may have created the wonders of your culture. Assemble them, be the audience so that we can regather in the circle that can make the waves flow again and bring us together in solemn prayer and story. Kia ora koutou. Kia ora means opening the door. Welcome.
Thank you, and welcome Hirini to this space where we can meet from all over the world, where we can join and discuss and explore and get to know each other in a way that I certainly haven't in the worldwide way before this past year. And it's been an absolute journey of exploration and discovery for me. And I didn't think that it would be possible to make new friends in this new space, but I have been proved wrong. And my life has definitely been a journey being proved wrong, and more things being possible than I think. And long may that continue. I'm very happy to be surprised continually. So when we talked the other night, my first question was, because I know so little, was what is Maori? And I wanted to be able to say it properly, to introduce you as well. So I'm doing my best, but I think you should really tell us about it with proper pronunciation.
Maori. Maori. It's both a state of ethnicity. Like any people, it represents a certain ethnicity from our part of the world into the specific. It's a derivative of ancient peoples of the Pacific. We have the Maori here, we go Aroha, which is love. We have our Hawaiians, they are Maoli, and they go Aloha. You go around the Pacific, the Ring of Fire, you have the Maori becoming the Malay, or the Malaysian, of which you get the derivative of Himalaya, or the Himalayas mountains. You keep going around the Pacific. Imagine you're on a journey, a voyage, good people. Come with me. Now going across, I see Canadians on here. Now go into the land of eagle and turtle. Come down, Maori name translated into the Maye. Maori, the Maoli, the Maye of the Mayans. Then we come around again down into South America with the kumara, the sweet potato, which is one of our origins, the basis of our existence, which comes from the Andean mountains. And they're known as the Mori. That little kumara, that little sweet potato that traversed our oceans thousands of years ago, only grows in one place on the planet. And there you can start to find the umbilical cords of our origins. And so the Maori is, in a sense, the peoples of the Pacific, the Ring of Fire. So just put that in your kit, your chalice. The next one I would like to just pour in is another drop. Maori as a state of being, ethnicity and energy. The word Ma means clear, the opening, the clear light of day, Ma. Ori is frequency, vibration, pure frequency. When you listeners are being Maori, you are being authentically you, inside the chalice of your embodiment, expressing and exchanging your energy of authenticity to the world. A lot of times we have been poured in with other additional thoughts, other additional identities. Now for a while, we don't know who we are and we have to share that. So becoming Maori is coming back to the authenticity of who you are and why you're here, which is one of the best next questions I would like us to consider. Why are we here on the planet right now? What other stories are we going to create so that the next generations of humanity can hear that during this time on the planet, these ones, the storytellers, the warriors, the eco-healers, everyone was united on a common cause. Amy, this is why I wanted to be part of this, because the storyteller must be able to create the stories that can create miracles and open minds that are still sedated right now.
So that's really interesting to me because, well, on so many levels, I love the fact of being pure frequency. And I think there are so many responses that I want to make to that. The first is I think lots of people find it very difficult to be pure frequency, to be completely authentic. And I think that lots and lots of people are still looking for that state of being. And I'm interested to know very much more about your healing, because I suspect that way your work as a healer is to help people find their authenticity. But the second thing that really comes to me out of that is that I think of the Maori culture and Indigenous people of kind of having this long line back of stories. And I would, before I met you, have been expecting you to tell traditional stories, to not be creating new stories, but maybe telling old stories in new ways and building bridges with those, but it to be based on old stories. And is that the case, or are you constantly creating new ones?
We are always in a constant state of creation. Every breath we take is a new breath along a whole path of breathing that started with our first sigh and will end with our last gasp. That is the story of our lives. Then from that space, we take the ancient traditions and myths, but we must make it relevant. Because in every myth, there is the story of the self seeking to unfind itself. And the myth is like a map. Because above every myth, beyond every myth, is some place of truth. It appeals to the young people when I talk about the ancient gods warring. And then you look at a family, you see those same elemental beings inside a family. You see the elder, serious one, the one who contemplates the questions with her furrowed brow and her chin on her hand. You get the other one who's laughing like a morning flower and just dancing. The frivolity, which sometimes people say, be careful. Gravity still hurts when you dance too close to the edge of life. You put them on in a patch, the warrior that's now the soldier, who comes back like myself and becomes the healer. Behind me are the 1,000 soldiers of the dead of the Maori battalion. And just recently I wrote a post because His Royal Highness, the Duke of Edinburgh, passed away, and I was a captain of our Governor General, and I escorted him. And he asked me questions like you asked me about my Maori ancestry and my aspirations. And so to answer your question, you must take the traditional and the modern, create a synthesis. You must be the first listener of your own story. You must take of your word. The Maori word is called kupu, and kupu means seed, to grow. Your words are the seeds of which you grow the ecology and the topography of your life. You are the tree of life coming from the seed that has been imbued into us. Stop living watered, diluted, bullshit lives, people, and use the excrement of life to grow strong. There is strength in imperfection. Deal with it. Incompletion. A lot of us haven't completed shit we should have done. And forgive me for using excrement. It was something I learned from the English. Shit, shite, or whatever the derivatives. There is actually power in the excrement because it has left our body. It is no longer needed in this body of life, just like when we leave this body and our soul continues on its journey of the celestial ones. This body has to go back to the planet. We can't take it with us. Same with these elders that I carry in spirit form, 1,000 of them. I walk the walk of remembrance. And so, to all of you listening, you are a story. The highs and lows of your life, the memories that still dwell in places that have not been healed, allow the light of the story of now to reveal that pain and let it be wisdom born of pain, so that you become a strength during these climate change, COVID times. Use this place. That's how I use traditional stories in some ways, Amy. I give it a modern face. I talk of the gods. The gods had imperfections too. They weren't all just peace and love. There was, as you know, within the various gods, I'm sure amongst the Celtic gods, the Greek gods, even amongst the Christians. I won't go there, but if we can find that level of reunion again, that is my dream.
That's certainly my feeling with stories, and the more and more I work with traditional stories, the more and more relevant they become. And I mean, certainly kind of, so my background is particularly working with Duncan Williamson and Scottish traveller stories. And those are old stories, and they are stories of the land. They are, the Scottish travellers would say that they were the first people who ever lived in Scotland. And as other races came in, those other races began to build houses and walls and claim land, whereas the travellers have continued to travel. And the more and more I listen to Duncan's stories and remember Duncan's stories, the more relevant, not the less relevant, the more relevant they become in these times. And definitely kind of those are the stories that I am telling. Those are stories that are absolutely about what is beneath our feet and the importance of it, and the elegance and importance of simplicity, and absolutely getting rid of the crap and what is at the heart of the matter, and not filling it with all of this other stuff. So are there any particular stories that you are just really bringing into the now, that are doing that job that you think are kind of just what we all need to hear in these COVID times and these times of climate change?
I will use, when we enter into the space of the story, you are altering yourself. When you slow down, and allow the pauses to come in between the beat of your own thinking. You start to use the space and the time. The ancient sound of the flute echoing the winds that pass through the valleys of time. We are not here long, so allow yourself to listen to the ancient voices of mountain, of stone, of river, for the stone and the bone are still close as one. The river and the sound of the modern. Kia ora. I just had a message. It's a phone call. And it's from a Marisa steward. Marisa, I'll use that because in the story, things that may seem to be annoyances are actually messages. Marisa is a derivative of Maria. Maria is also from Mori. La Marie, which is the ocean. I am the ocean, the ancient Irish, that origin story. I am the hawk, I am the seed, I am the ocean, La Marie. Mary, an important point now. I'm going to jump into this. Her name was also Steward. I believe the stewards were from Scotland. Having moved to New Zealand, now I'm going to talk about this because this is a relevant point now. When you change your names, you change the story. My name is Hirini Reedy. The Irish came here. They married into my line, which is the mother line, which is the chieftainess line, but because of the colonial model, this guy who came from Ireland, believing the potato famine, then had the sovereign right to put his name over the mother. So this little interjection here is to remind us that go back and excavate in all your cultures where there's authenticity, and when there's another story, another name, another myth, another doctrine, another coat of arms, crossing of the staves, the sword and the Excalibur, like on any coat of arms, like flags. Those are points that I like to bring through because people, the story is a living space. You must use everything around you to become part of your story. You must alter and bend time, spaces, interruptions into being part of the narrative of your story. That little thing that might have been an irritant was a message, which I'm now using to signify that part of the story now is to go back into the Marie, La Marie, into the ocean, the amniotic fluids of the planet. Find the steward, become the guardian of that water. Become the steward and go back into the ocean and go into the depths of thy being. Dig and dive deep, people. Immerse yourself in that space where the waters are pure and they come from the authenticity of the womb of Mother Earth herself. And then you become the steward, you step into your warrior pose, and then you escort that rediscovery back out into the outworld. And you take it as your offering. If this is the only thing you remember from my corridor or my talk, then I would be very happy, even if I passed into the other world, knowing that this breath will continue with you, who will take it and make it part of your storytelling. All right, just nod wherever you are and put your hands over your heart to know that there is a heartbeat. We don't have the luxury of time now. You must be the storyteller, the warrior, the healer, the person who uses their phone to be a point of reference again. This has been Maori. What you're seeing here is me being my authentic self. There will be other storytellers who will have a different approach. I honor the diversity of life and creation. But when I stand strong in who I am, then I can hold my part of the hoop. I can hold my part on this planet. And I ask that each and every one of you become a pillar for the returning of Mother Earth's dream.
And the
And
water.
put some comments in the chat just to affirm that, because when you write it down, when you carve it down, and when you declare it to yourself, it means that it's imbuing into your being. Thank you.
And the waters are, I mean, that's something that we share. I think the waters here are feminine on this side of the ocean as well in the UK. And definitely those are stories that have been submerged in our culture that we are kind of having to rediscover and re-excavate. But we do have so many traditions like well dressing, and every river has a goddess, every well has a goddess, every pool has a goddess. Sometimes they have lost their own individual story. Sometimes they've been made into fairies or nymphs or sprites, but they are mostly still there. If you look for them and if you listen for them, you can find them. And I think wherever you are, that's the thing, is that there is a sacred space of water nearby. And I think, you know, I felt the call of the ocean, and we've come to the ocean this week, which is a beautiful place to be. And this is a beach. When I come to the beach, this tends to be it. This is the one that I walk. But the water that I spend most time of is just a really little stream that is by my house, but it needs taking care of, and it needs its stories being told just as much as the great ocean, I think. And I think that's one of the reasons that I am drawn to the Maori culture, that I'm so interested to find out more about it, because it feels that the mother side of our culture has been deeply suppressed in the West. It is still there. The stories are still there to be heard. And I think more and more people are telling them, more and more people are listening to them, more and more people are feeling that the balance is off kilter and are trying to do something about that. And in Maori culture, it's very much that the feminine is really important, isn't it? And the goddess, I don't know how many goddesses you have. We talked about the goddess of the night, who I just found to be inspiring. I don't know how many goddesses you have, and I'd love to hear more about the feminine within the Maori traditions.
This has been a phenomenon that's been part of the consciousness on the planet, where the feminine principle has been actually suppressed. Not just in Christian and Middle Eastern and other cultures as well. And I forgive me if I do not mean to be offensive, because I know that the matriarchal grandmothers are still strong. Even in some of my own Maori culture, there has been a suppression because there's been a loss of the tradition. You've had a hierarchy of patriarchy come in. When you have sovereigns and kings and crossed swords and all the things that our military are involved with, when really the military are meant to be there to be the protectors of the life force of the planet, and that which gives life, the source of life. Not turn it into some sort of combatant commodity that becomes a resource. We've turned the source of life into a resource, and that's why we're now suffering. That is why we're reaching this epic point, like mythological proportions, where the planet is starting to climatically implode and explode. And so we must tell a new story, derived from all the voices of our ancient ones, to bring back the pixels of wisdom to put into a grand picture, a vision of a vibrant planet that is incarnating into her dream. This planet has a dream, just like all of us. She is an extension of ourselves, and she will unfurl and unfold and awaken into her new dream. Whether we'll be part of her evolution, or we were just part of yesterday's existence. And it's happened before. When you look at the ancient memories that are held in sacred temples and places that have not been visited by the common awareness of these ancient places. And so with the Maori, we are also ensuring that the feminine principle is coming back. In some tribes, it's a lot more than others. In my tribe, I come from a very strong line of loud Maori women. And I say that with love, because sometimes the men, and when you have very strong women who know what they want and they cut straight to you, sometimes as a man just has to sit and suck it up. You sit and suck it up, but you also don't sit there and be servile such that you've lost your sense of testicles. No, I'm not saying that. You don't want a neutered man, because that's even worse than a man that's too loud. He just becomes a bit of baggage. Forgive me for being so direct with this, but when you have unity of opposites, you're able to combine the embracing hand with the hand that needs to grip something, turn them into waveforms that you can dance, and be able to make the bird that flies and give wing to our common dream. Two wings comes back together again to create the central. So the masculine is coming back. Part of my role is interesting because obviously I'm very male, very physical, and I'm actually got quite a strong intensity. But I remember when I went to Kauai. Hawaii is a very feminine island. One of the kahunas said to me, because I did a certain ceremony at a female a heiau, which is sacred space. You see, women bleed. They're menses, the moon cycle, and we just had a new moon. I normally fast. I fast on the new moon. It's a time of renewal. Placing your blood as part of your own declaration to your own word. And I did a ceremony similar to that at this feminine heiau or altar, where I put my own blood on the feminine rock. The kahuna said to me, that's never been done before by a man, because no, it is the woman. And he said to me, you are Hirini Nui Kapo inside a man's body. You are Hirini Nui Tapo, the goddess of the night, inside a male body. I sort of looked at him with, but then I realized that a lot of my ability, I do work a lot at night, and now you're in the night over there. The night is different to the day. The night is the great mystery, because you can only see so much with your eyes and your senses before then you have to feel into the depths of the night. And you take that unknowingness out further beyond the physicality of our being and existence. We are in the great unknown. That is the feminine potential. From out of the night, there will emerge the seedlings of stars, planets, constellations, which will manifest into the physicalization of the genealogy of creation. Of within those forms will come the existence of many life forms. Within the many life forms will come the human form. Within the many of the human form will come the many races that populate the planet. Within the many races, there will come down the descent lines, of which will then manifest in you and I, and all gathered here in this moment. Then we will soon pass into the afterlife. And what will continue will be our dream, whether it's in our children, our grandchildren, or the work or the stories that we leave behind as footprints of having passed. And so in that moment, I just went through a bit of genealogy. We normally go, from within the great nothingness, there is allness within its being. It cannot be grasped, it cannot be measured. It exists beyond existence itself. From within that existence, it manifests the po, the night itself, the deep, fertile night, the night beyond any measurement. The first sound, the first word, the first embryo, of which is the awakening of a supernova, a constellation, whatever you call it, and then life experience is found. And I even listen to my own spiritual ear. Learn to plug in, learn to plug in, so that you can also be your own storyteller to tell the stories that you need to hear in this time. You are the first listener of your own story from creation itself. You are part of creation's dream. Be able to separate the daily noise, the daily doing of shit, with the real reason and authenticity. So learn to plug in and hear your own soul and your own heart speaking. You wanted to hear Maori, my version of Maori stories? I will actually relate it to the relevance of the kupu being heard with a new ear, a spiritual ear, whatever you frame. The kids need new terminology now, Amy. In a technological world where Google and Instagram and likes start to remind them that they are more than just a technological interface that they've grown up with and be conditioned to and immersed in. Come back to the spiritual ear, see with the spiritual eye, start to be the spiritual being having this existence right now.
That sounds like such a powerful moment on Hawaii. And you come to us tonight so eloquent and so self-assured and so Maori, so kind of perfect vibrations in that role of authenticity. And I think that that is something that many of us are striving for. And certainly I, in my 40s, I am so much more comfortable with who I am. And I know what I'm trying to say with the stories. And I'm much more assured about my place on this earth and what I need to do. I'm not always completely there, but most of the time, I can inhabit that role. I know who I am. I wonder if you have always been as authentic as you are now, and if you know, or if you have had that same journey. I mean, becoming a healer, becoming a storyteller, finding your authenticity. How has that journey been for you? You're the first listener of your own story, but it seems like a story that we would really like to hear.
Generally, we start off, I grew up in a very remote place in the mountains. I actually am a very introspective person. I was always very quiet. Basically, the forests and the mountains were my friends. You didn't have to say much. Then you leave those places. You come out into this world. You have to go to school. You have to then experience other things. And after a while, you lose the memory of just the innocence. And when I talk about the authenticity, you start to then assume aspirations. You start to assume other people's values. You start to aspire to certain career paths. But underneath, you're also having your own truths, sometimes conflicting with the outward expectations of parents, of society, of culture, and all these things. And that's where I talk about being authentic. After a while, you've got a bit of knowledge in life. When you generally reach 50, you should have sorted your shit out. You should have actually found what's authentically you and what are you just living a lie and continuing with the nice sedated things. It's not easy to actually remind yourself that you'll be living a lie. It's not easy to find that even in the relationships that you sort of just put up with it just for the sake of convenience and keeping the face. And that's all part of the story. We must deal with the imperfection of having been inauthentic, having gone into the pit, having gone into the sewer, and yet at the bottom of the sewer, at the pile of excrement, you come up with a crystal. And one of the things in the old days of the passing of the ceremonies was to swallow the stone and sit in fasting and wait for the stone to pass through you. So that means you got to go and look through your shit. But during that time when you're waiting, the stone, it normally takes maybe 2. In my case, I swallowed 2 stones. And this was part of my own discovery where I actually had to go into the spirit world because a lot of the ancient elders that did the ceremonies weren't here anymore. So you have to put yourself into a space where you start to reassemble the ceremonies that put us into states of beingness that are very different to the daily state. And the swallowing of the stone is like us. It passes through the intestines of our being as we pass through the intestines of life. And then when we actually pass out, We pass through life just like the excrement. It completed its journey. It's not there for us anymore. It's there for the planet. It's there for the fly and the other angels of decay who take the excrement of life and recreate it into nutrients for new life, the afterlife. Generally, you'll find your stone in your own excrement, but there's a story of when you discover your stone and then you put it back into the stream of which you were asked to get it from. And so we all must create our own metaphors. And again, with me, I'm still learning to deal with the excrement. We've still got our work to do. As long as we're still breathing, we've still got our work to do, to excavate. So good people, wherever you are, do your own daily pilgrimage, do your own daily steps, re-explore yourself, ask yourself a question. Why am I here on the planet this morning or this day? Why am I here? What can I do with the life that's left with me or for me? Ask those big questions. Ask those questions of yourself and allow little miracles to appear where you find that your answer may walk past you. You may get a feeling, tapping into your own spiritual aquifer, which you can perhaps rather tell your own story.
I think we should all do that. But again, I think some of us need some help. And I'm really interested. So you were sort of saying about kind of you've created then a lot of the ceremonies. And that seems heartbreaking as well, that some of those ceremonies were lost. And you sort of skated over that. But that sounds like it was quite a big journey for you, having to recreate those. When did you know that that was part of your role and it was part of who you needed to be a healer and not only to recreate those ceremonies for yourself, but to pass them on?
We all have the signs. It's like tracking. If you retract the story of your life, you will see that there's the journey of surface, and beneath the surface is your own trail where you are actually aware of your journey, and there's a part of you, that other spiritual side of you that walks with you, that's also saying, you may need to change the journey of your life so that there's alignment. Otherwise, what will happen, you'll be a split person. And there's a lot of split people in the planet today. People who are doing what they're expected to walk trails versus that of being authentic. So part of this whole storytelling for me is finding the relevant ways that I can be myself. I'm more than just a healer. In fact, I don't even call myself a healer, but that's a label. Everyone wants a label. Entrepreneur, healer, eco-warrior, they're just labels on the container of who you are. Let not the label define who you are. You see, the name tree is just a word that was put into my consciousness as a memory to represent a certain figure of life. I call it Rachel. And this is why this is important, because we must re-excavate some of the ancient traditions. My grandfather was one of the last ones who went through our ancient schools of the medicine men and the tohunga, for a better word. But they were all suppressed. And then along came World War II. We went off to fight and defend the United Kingdom against its foes. We, the colonies, New Zealand, Australia, the Gurkhas, the Indians, all went to support the call of arms. We heard the name of Adolf Hitler being sitting down here in New Zealand. He was going to come and invade. Ein Reich, ein Volk, ein Führer, Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil. Ein Reich, one state, ein Volk, one Volk, ein Führer, one Hitler, Sieg Heil. Those flags up the back there. One of them has the Union Jack on the New Zealand ensign. The other one is the actual flags that ancestors or my ancestors signed with King William IV. The predecessor to Queen Victoria. We're still waiting for the United Kingdom to honor its sovereign word. This is part of the storytelling, Amy. This is when we must honor the word. And as I talk to you, I'm also talking to the ancients that are listening through this. It's time to re-honor the words. British Empire, start to re-honor your word. Your Majesty, remember your coronation oath when you got down your knee before your God and you declared and you swore that with your heart you will uphold the oath. I remind you of this. And all of us too, we have our important work to do when we dedicate ourselves to something noble. Don't just make it empty words. You must become the word. You must become the oath. You must become that which is sovereign. Yet allow all other beings to have their existence within this great circle of life. So Amy, you get your sword out. You go into your own ceremonies where you put yourself through the fire, through the water, through the stone, stand on your mountaintops. You find whatever you need to do to make yourself true. Yes, ask the questions, but look for the quest.
I think narrowing down the quest is the hard point for me, because you are absolutely right about our sovereigns, and I think many places in the world are deeply divided, and certainly the UK doesn't feel like a particularly united place at the moment. And there are many of us who are not very happy with our leaders and the way that they are leading this country. And absolutely, I'm speaking out, and I think most of the people who are on this from the UK will also agree. And we are speaking out. And I think sometimes it is difficult not to feel powerless. And though I'm in two-minded about the internet. I think that sometimes too much technology can definitely get in the way. It can be a distraction. It can be a sink for time. But what it allows is moments like this, and it allows like-minded people to find each other and to come together, and it allows people to speak out. And I think that more and more people are speaking out, and I think that there is a huge swell now, hopefully in the right direction. There are lots of people who have put on the chat that they are going to be pillars for Mother Earth. This is a place to declare that allegiance. This is a place to go forth and do that from, and to meet other people to walk alongside with. And yes, I think, there's been a huge outpouring of grief, allegedly, for Prince Philip. I haven't met that many people who have been pouring out that grief, but you're right that there has been a lot of broken oaths, not only to New Zealand, but to many of the colonies and many places that a lot of us are struggling with. And this last year has been interesting, and it's been like lots of things have. I mean, hopefully it's part of a healing process that kind of, it feels like all the pus is coming to the surface. There have been lots of boils coming that kind of, and things that have needed to be talked about and things that need to be sorted out are being talked about. They're not sorted, but they're being talked about with Black Lives Matter. And there's been a huge thing about women's equality within Britain. And I don't know how far that's spread out through the rest of the world. And I think lockdown has been one of those times, and everything that you're talking about, Hirini, people have had maybe a little bit of time to reflect and to examine themselves and to look and go, what is the truth about myself? Who do I want to be when we come out of this? All of this stuff that has been keeping me going, what of it is relevant and what of it needs to be ditched, and what's actually the heart of the matter? Hopefully.
Yes, could I
please do
contribute to that, so that I'm also looking at the wonderful contributions, good people, that you're making. Someone has just said, make your life a prayer mat. You must turn your life into your own temple, into your own space if that's possible. In fact, use all the resources. You can go online now to find poetry by Rumi, Khalil Gibran, or whatever that may speak to a certain part of you. Bring that into your kit. Use technology as an enabler, but you must then embody what you have assembled. You must become that poem which spoke to you. Someone say the grass is always greener where you water it. I believe Elizabeth, I just see it up there. Your grandmother, again, there's a message there, the grandmothers. The grass is always greener where you water it. Look for that place inside you, that field where you can lie next to the memories of beautiful ones that you've passed. And in that moment, just water yourself, water the barrenness, the dryness, stretched out being. And for that moment, you are creating your own gardens of Eden, your own garden of Eden. You're re-nurturing your own tree of life.
I love that. I love that saying, Elizabeth. It's just one of those things that you kind of, that maybe a little bit has been lost, because we all know the phrase, the grass is always greener, is so well known, but to add that extra bit where you water it just utterly changes the whole meaning of it and makes it such a more sumptuous and vibrant and something to hold on to. It makes it a really beautiful phrase and a beautiful condensation of something that's so important. I'm gonna take that, Elizabeth. I think it's fabulous. So I mean, you talked about the promises of our sovereigns, and yeah, I don't think the British government has, we have the British as a race, and certainly as a sovereign power, has an awful lot to answer for, I think. And I think to its own people as well. And I think that's something that kind of the British struggle with. And certainly my own being, I kind of gone, well, I'll acknowledge that and I will do what I can to help it. I can't take on that guilt, and it wasn't me. And I think actually, the British sovereigns have done almost as much to their own people as they have to other races and other countries. I mean, there's a definite section of British government and British elite that have suppressed, and that goes along with the patriarchy and lots of other things that we were talking about. And
can I just comment on that one, because it's a microcosm of a certain state of consciousness. It's not only the British Empire. There are others too during that time in these last 2,000 years, and even going back further, where we've seen great empires rise and fall, the Roman Empire and others. And they've all left their wonderful contributions. Londonerian. Yeah. There's so the plight of the indigenous versus the arrival of the new. We're having these same issues now, and we'll have it more in these climate change times where we'll have climate